2000, 74% of self-identified Christians in this country said that their faith was an important part of their daily life. In 2025, it's 54%, a 20-point decline. Barna says, quote, when belief ceases to carry weight in a person's worldview, Christian practices tend to follow suit. Barna also reports that amongst Christians, 31% believe they have a personal responsibility to spread the gospel, down from 35% in 2000. Michael Harrington reporting.
Australia is mourning the deaths of 15 Jews murdered this past weekend at a Hanukkah celebration on Bondi Beach. A giant menorah is being projected onto the walls of Sydney's iconic Opera House at night. 1,000 people attended a vigil for the victims. Hundreds of bouquets of flowers have been placed at a makeshift memorial on Bondi Beach. This is SRN News. President Trump has signed an executive order to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug.
It doesn't legalize marijuana in any way, shape, or form, and in no way sanctions its use as a recreational drug.
But it does allow it as a medical drug. The move could ease regulations and expand medical research. A newly passed defense spending bill includes federal recognition of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina.
Recognition comes after more than a century of effort and decades of congressional consideration. Federal recognition provides access to resources like federal dollars, grants, and the Indian Health Service. It also allows the tribe to put land into trust. The tribe faced opposition from some tribal leaders. They questioned the Lumbee's historic and genealogical claims. The Lumbee tribe has been recognized by North Carolina since 1885, has about 60,000 members. Rich Thomason, Washington.
More at srnnews.com.
Luke 6, verse 31 advises us to be unselfish. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. A call to unselfishness in Luke 6, verse 31.
If you enjoy VCY radio, you'll want to watch WVCY television. Visit vcy.tv or download the free app from your app store.
VCY America is KVCX Gregory and WVIW Bridgeport. Christian Information Radio.
History was made on today's date. Stay tuned for an American Minute with Bill Federer.
The same year 21-year-old George Washington was fighting in the French-Indian War, a Christmas carol became popular. It was written by Charles Wesley, born this day, December 18, 1707. He was the brother of John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, and together they served as missionaries among the Indians and settlers of Georgia. Charles Wesley's Christmas carol begins, "Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners reconciled. Joyful all ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies. With angelic host proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
We thank you for joining us here on Crosstalk. Each day we gather together to keep you informed on critical issues. And friends, we've got another one today as globalists have an agenda which really casts aside national sovereignty, private property rights, and individual freedom, and they have a lust for worldwide control over every facet of your life. You know, what you eat, the water you drink, the energy you use, where you live, what you own, what you drive, how you travel, your health care, your education, every aspect of your life. And the propulsion is toward a one-world system economically, politically, and even spiritually. Regular meetings are being held by the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, and other globalist bodies. And one who monitors this globalist activity and the agenda is with us today. We welcome back Gary Kah. Gary is the founder and director of Hope for the World. Yes, indeed, friends, there is hope. Gary is editor of Hope for the World Update. He's an author and former Europe and Middle East trade specialist for the Indiana state government. Gary, nice to have you back with us on Crosstalk.
Hi, Jim. It's always good to be with you.
So, Gary, although we've got a president who was rather resistant to this globalist agenda, this has not stopped the meetings or the advancements from these globalist bodies. If anything, the Trump administration's been a burr in their saddle, but that's not thwarted their plans, has it?
No, it is a global effort. A lot of it's coming out of Europe. You've got the World Economic Forum and a lot of related organizations. They have their agenda, and they try to do what they can to work around anything coming out from the U.S. that might be opposing that agenda. And it doesn't help any when you have so many mayors of big cities in the U.S. that are in line, step by step in line, with this globalist agenda. And I think a lot of the battle in the U.S. is taking place in our cities. I had a statistic here where I'm trying to find it. Of the 50 biggest cities in the United States, over 85% of them are led by Democrat mayors. And anymore, these aren't your traditional Democrats, but they're very progressive for the most part, if you want to use that term, far left. And as of a month ago, there were only 7 large cities of the top 50 that had Republican mayors, but now that's down to 6 because Miami, the Republican lost by 19%. It wasn't even close down there. And so if they can take the big cities through globalists with Marxist leanings, I believe in the U.S., that's how they hope to accomplish their political agenda.
Yeah, that's amazing. And some whole states we're seeing go that direction as well, Gary. I mean, when we see the governor of Illinois and Governor Pritzker and then we go to Governor Newsom in California and Hochul in New York. I mean, we're seeing whole states that are just, kind of joining in this rebellion as well. Yeah,
and in some cases, you've got an entire state dominated by one large city, and a lot of times people in other parts of the state try to overcome the odds, but it's very difficult in a state like Illinois. If Chicago goes 60% one way, the rest of the state has to go 80-85% in the other direction to be able to overcome that. It's almost impossible. Same thing in Minnesota. I've been up there a lot, and a lot of the outlying areas are very conservative. There's even somewhat of a Bible Belt up there, I would call it. And the people are very frustrated because it's so hard for them to overcome everything going on in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And then, of course, California. You've got San Francisco and L.A., but the Central Valley and certain parts of California are fairly conservative, but they just can't overcome the big cities. And so I think 20 or 30 years ago, actually, some of the mayors' organizations, they get together once or twice a year. I believe it was decided through those networks of mayors that they had a real shot if they could take the big cities, that they could influence this agenda and overcome any opposition to them at the grassroots level. And they're attempting that right now. We'll see what happens over the next year.
Gary Kah with us today here on Crosstalk. And Gary, there's been so much that's transpired here in 2025. I mean, the UN continues to mobilize on their sustainable development goals. They're mobilizing on climate action, their advocacy for how they see human rights and push for abortion, their continued targeting of Israel. The list just goes on and on and on. But through your eyes, Gary, as you monitor these things, you review 2025 in your mind's eye, what do you see as being some of the significant matters of this past year pushing this globalist agenda?
Well, Pope Francis was strongly pushing this agenda. He was known by some of the globalists as the globalist spiritual leader. And a lot of people are unaware of that, but he was very much involved in this push toward globalization, and was even the keynote speaker at times in Dubai at the World Government Summit. And so his replacement by Leo is quite interesting. A lot of people are waiting to see what happens there, but people need to bear in mind that Leo was picked by cardinals, a majority of whom were appointed by Francis. He managed to appoint a majority of the cardinals that voted for Leo. And so many Vatican watchers believe there's not going to be a substantial change on that front. Mm-hmm. The reason why this is important is because the Vatican's been out in front of promoting the hyper-environmental agenda, the whole climate change, a narrative, and also the global education scheme to educate people worldwide to prepare them for the New World Order. Francis actually launched such an initiative. So we'll see how Leo carries on with that. It's quite interesting to me that, the first American Pope, and his brother supposedly is a pretty strong MAGA Republican. And so I'm curious how that's going to affect President Trump. Mm-hmm. Is he going to get cozy with the Pope because of his brother supporting him, or is he wise enough to keep some distance there? Because historically the Vatican has not been a friend of the United States. This goes way, way back. Abraham Lincoln issued warning after warning on that, but a lot of that has been removed from any history books, and so people aren't aware of that. So, but along with the climate change agenda and an overall push toward socialist principles, there's a very strong interfaith push coming from the Vatican as well, a type of dominionist interfaith. We can take the world politically, and then maybe Christ can return. And so it is a complex picture, because how do you work other religions into that belief? Mm-hmm. But the popes have been doing that, the last few popes. So I'm going to keep a close eye on that. And here in this country, you've got this growing hatred for anything Jewish or Christian that is coming out through the big cities, largely because the mayors of these cities haven't really pushed back much at all. They've set the stage for it, really. And so just a few statistics here that I found interesting. The ones for 2025 are not in yet fully, so I'm going to quote 2024, and we know that 2025 is only worse. Anti-Jewish incidents in our country rose 893% over a 10-year period from 2014 to 2024. And in 2024 alone, there were 9,354 anti-Jewish incidents in the United States. Now, if Christians think, well, that's the Jews, but it's not Christians yet, well, wrong. In 2024, there were 415 acts of hostility on churches in the U.S., which is up 730% from 2018. So both Jews and Christians are feeling the heat from forces out there determined to stamp out whatever remains of our Judeo-Christian ethic. And so we have to be prepared for more of this going forward. I think we've just seen the beginning, unfortunately, of this. And again, a lot of this is taking place in the big cities. It's not just here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've seen what has happened in Australia and Sydney over the last week. By the way, we were at that park back in early April. Right. We were actually over there. I spoke in Sydney, and we visited there. We stood in that place so we could visualize, how the beach is laid out and mm-hmm. and what must have happened there. I mean, just a horrible tragedy. And then a Jewish professor just being killed at MIT, mm-hmm. and this other part about Brown University. I haven't had a chance to verify this yet, but supposedly what we're not being told is that the class that was attacked was being led by Rachel Friedberg, a Jewish professor who leads the school's Judaic Studies program. Now, if that's true, that might have been a targeted attack. We'll see what comes out in the main news in the next few days. But, yeah. I was told it was a study hall maybe it was, and maybe she was overseeing that. I don't know. But during the Hanukkah season now, it's just one thing after another. And so our Jewish friends really need to be careful, but also Christians who've been standing with Israel and who take their marching orders from the Lord and not from any global regime or New World Order organizers or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Gary, and I find it very interesting that when I asked, your review here of this year on globalism, you started on the religious side and the influence that is coming, through the Vatican on this globalized system is amazing. At the same time, we know that there have been meetings happening this year, the Summit of the Future, World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization with their medical guidelines and et cetera for the world. Some pretty significant events taking place this past year, really trying to push this continued globalist agenda.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's coming in about 5 or 6 different major areas and some smaller areas as well. I mean, on the economy, the religion, the like I said, the mayors, which is more of a political effort, and then through the environment, which continues to be manipulated, that whole agenda. I saw an interview a while back, I think it was on CNN, they interviewed Al Gore, and they threw out a softball to him, and it went something like this: how could you have gotten it so right years ago when you were warning us about climate change?
What?
Yeah, and I thought, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
This guy said, the oceans would come up something like 30 feet within a few decades. They've come up a few inches. I mean, I would have completely said it differently because he was off by over 1,000%. I mean, not even close on anything. And so it just shows the bias of the mass media. They're driving this agenda, and naive people are going along with it. Climate does change. I mean, 600, 700, 800 years ago, there were times where it was warmer than now and also colder than now.
Right.
And back in the 60s, it was very cold. We had more pollution in the United States back in the 60s, by the way, by far than we do now on a per capita basis. And so it's interesting. It's supposedly warmer out, although we sure didn't feel it this last week.
No,
it was
not
5
at all.
below zero a few mornings ago here in Indianapolis. Anyway,
So-
a lot of things they're throwing at us to try to move their agenda along.
And friends are seeking to do it here by stealth and sometimes just right out in the open. But not only looking past, but what's ahead here in this new year of 2026? What are some things that are on the horizon? We'll be back with more information after the break. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, Creation Seminar speaker at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how many different types of animals did Noah take on board the ark?
Chris, detractors from the biblical flood story say that there were way too many animals to have fit on board the ark. But not so. Let's look carefully. First off, we need to recognize that most animals live in the ocean and would not have to be on board the ark. They would survive, at least in representative numbers, outside the ark. By the way, Noah didn't even have to take 2 of every species. The Bible says 2 of every kind. Probably a broader category which might include a number of species, like the dog kind. Altogether, I suspect that there were probably less than 20,000 animals on board the ark. This was difficult for Noah, but not impossible. At least that's the way I see it from a back to Genesis perspective.
For more on creation, visit our website at www.icr.org. I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Gary Kaz with us today, founder and director of Hope for the World and editor of Hope for the World Update, and taking a look at globalism back at 2025, looking forward in 2026 as well. And so much of this is just in continued movement here, Gary. It's because it's all part of one agenda. So it's not like things are over and done in 25 and now new. It's just one continuous push for globalism to take place on many, many different fronts. And as you were talking in that first segment, you talked about the impact upon these major cities across the United States. And we know that, and I'm going to have you comment on what happened in New York City and what we're going to see happen there as well, but this just has seemed to give a whole new, fresh impetus for those that are coming from the socialistic perspective to get engaged in politics and to see even more mayors and governors be elected, and men and women of Congress that follow this socialist agenda. But you saw what happened to the surprise of many as to where New York has decided to go. This city will not be the same.
Yeah, exactly. I just finished an article, and the caption under the picture says, "New York City falls to Marxism." That's not an overstatement. I mean, Mamdani, he comes from a very strong Marxist, globalist background, and to make it more interesting, he's a Muslim, but he got 50.4% of the vote. And Cuomo, who was second, running on the independent ticket, got 41.6%. So really, it was a landslide. It wasn't even close. And so to think that the center of world trade and free market capitalism, and by far the most influential city in America, New York City, voted this guy in, I think that is a sign of things to come. And just weeks after that, Seattle voted in a very far-left socialist mayor, Katie Wilson. And then just last week, Miami, that had been run by a Republican mayor, voted in a left-leaning mayor, not as drastic as some of these others, but still it was a landslide. And so some people say, oh, it's just coincidence that these certain cities are turning over. But listen to this. According to a nationwide Gallup poll that was conducted this past August, 66% of Democrats and 14% of Republicans hold a positive view of socialism. And what that boils down to is that approximately somewhere between 35 to 40% of Americans are now squarely in the socialist camp. That's a lot. If it was 5 or 10%, we could roll our eyes and say, well, it's a bunch of crazies. They're never going to go anywhere. But if you've got 35 to 40% nationwide, in some of the big cities, you've got higher percentages than that. So on any given day, these socialists can win if they can turn out the vote. It all comes down to what percent of voters they can turn out. But if they can get 80, 85, 90% of their people out to vote, they can take almost any city in the United States now, and that's scary. That's very different from how things were 20 or 30 years ago.
Now, Gary, I want you to link to this. I mean, a lot of this doctrine is coming through our education system and the university system today, and we're producing person after person after person with this mindset.
Exactly. I mean, you've got it coming through the media, through the universities, through liberal deconstructionist churches, through the World Council of Churches. They're pushing a lot of this kind of stuff. So it's coming at us from different angles, and also social media. It's been penetrated, in my view, just as heavily as the legacy media. And so young people that don't like to read or do their own research, they listen to these podcasts all day long, and it's turning them against the Judeo-Christian worldview to a large extent. And it's playing into the hands of the globalists, I believe, although there are definitely exceptions to that. Mm-hmm. But we've got to be careful anything we take in and do our own homework. It's getting more and more difficult for me, I have to tell you. When we started this over 30 years ago, I could fairly easily stay on top of all the major developments taking place around the world. And then by the late 90s, it was almost a full-time job just tracking developments, global developments involving the environmental movement and then the interfaith movement, more and more meetings taking place there, and it has just snowballed to where now it's difficult to be an expert on everything. I mean, we do our level best. We've got wonderful researchers around the world that get information to us from other places because this is a globalist effort. It's not just here in the United States. In fact, I would say if it wasn't for the United States right now, Europe is pretty much in the bag. But because there has been growing opposition to globalization in the United States, it's emboldened some of our friends in Europe, and they're taking a stronger stand now in the UK and France and Germany and some other places. So the World Economic Forum leaders, they just kind of wish the U.S. would go away, because everything that we're bringing out, it's beginning to have an impact over there as well. So it's really an all-out propaganda war at this point.
And what's interesting, and there are countries that are standing up. I mean, Chile just elected a conservative president, the Donald Trump of Chile, and so forth. But I'd like to talk about the impact of the Trump administration, because they are literally, they're boycotting a number of these meetings, the UN events and so forth, the recent COP conference that was held in Brazil and so forth. And it appears that some of these globalist bodies, they are still running full steam ahead. They're advancing their agenda. And I heard the comment from some, we're just waiting for, just another 3 years from now when President Trump is no longer in office, then we can put this agenda on the United States with the next president. Some are anticipating that aspect, that whoever would assume the presidency after Donald Trump, that they're going to be able to, if they have somebody like the likes of Joe Biden, he's going to, take everything hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, right now I think their main strategy is damage control. Just keep things level without going backwards too far until their next chance, if they can get one of their people into office. And it would be interesting if Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris ran on the same ticket together. You never know. Right now they appear to be adversaries to an extent, and they're both from California, so it's probably unlikely. But if they ran on the same ticket together, there are enough crazy people out there that would vote for them. I think they could actually get in. But we hope and pray for the best. It's not all about politics. Obviously, the spiritual foundation of our country is the most important, and if people aren't spiritually discerning, they're going to make huge mistakes politically by voting in socialists in the name of compassion. I know some Christian ladies, wonderful ladies, who have been voting what I would consider far left out of compassion, because they think Trump doesn't show enough compassion, and so they'd rather vote for someone with communist leanings, and a lot of times they're not even aware of that. You have to sit them down, show them documentation. But that's where we're at as a nation, and a lot of churches aren't taking a stand on this, and so they're not applying Scripture to things that are happening in everyday life around us. And so the Bible needs to be taught, but there's a practical side to it as well, how to implement the Lord's teachings into the things that we're dealing with now in our country, morally, culturally, and politically as well. I want to just, if I may, I wanted to shift gears a little bit, because I wanted to get something in here that I think is extremely important moving ahead in this year, and it has to do with the economy and the amount of debt that we have and the agenda behind that. So with your permission, can I jump into that?
Sure. Let's take a look ahead. I just put up the world debt clock right now, Gary, and it shows $38.495 trillion here for the United States. I advanced that in the next few years, and it's go in the mid-40s as far as that's concerned. And that doesn't really reflect the entire national debt. But let's talk about where we're headed there.
Yeah, isn't that nuts? Yeah. I mean, you can't even fathom that kind of debt. Economic analyst Lau Vegas wrote, and this is a direct quote, in 2025 alone, and this was earlier in 2025, so it'd be even more now. He said, in 2025 alone, the U.S. needs to borrow around $10.9 trillion. That's not a typo. Roughly $1.9 trillion of that is new borrowing to cover this year's budget deficit, but the rest, about $9 trillion, is old debt that matures this year and needs to be rolled over. Most of that was issued back when interest rates were near zero, but now it's being refinanced at over 5%, all while the government is already spending more than $1 trillion a year on interest, which is more than the entire U.S. military budget. So in other words, a lot of the increase that we're having to pay in interest is coming from the debt that we already owe that now we're going to have to pay higher interest on. A lot of people aren't aware of that. So compared to the Biden administration, the $1.9 trillion of new debt this year isn't as bad as you might expect, because it's been running upwards of $4 billion a year, going further into debt in some cases. But it's not looking at all the debt that's being rolled over. So how are we going to manage this? Unless we have a thriving economy with much more tax revenue coming in that can help the federal government pay this, things are kind of shaky right now. And this is something that's really being highlighted and pointed out by China and the BRICS nations, because they want to replace the U.S. dollar. They want to replace it with a global electronic digital currency. So you've got Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and about 10 other nations now looking at joining in with them. And as long as the U.S. economy is very strong and the stock market's doing well, I think some of the other countries are reluctant to jump ship away from the dollar, and so they're in a wait-and-see mode right now. It's like they're in just a holding pattern. But that could change very quickly if things go downhill in this country. And I feel like I think the globalists, in order to bring in their new global economic system, which is ultimately where they want to go, because then they could really control everyone, the current system has to at least appear as if it's failing, if not all out, just bomb out. And so if they could pull this off, say, next fall, right before the elections, to make, to influence the elections and make the current administration look really bad, I think they would do it if they could. So we'll see what happens with that. But the ultimate goal is completely a cashless society. In Europe, things are already moving along. In fact, let me go even further. There are approximately 130 countries that have been working toward the introduction of central bank digital currencies, CBDCs for short. Nearly 50 of those countries are planning to partly or fully implement their digital currency in 2026. If this goes through as planned, that's going to be maybe the biggest thing that happens in the coming year, is the rolling out of the digital currencies. Here in the U.S., the goal of the big banks, the international banks, is implementation by the end of 2027. And that's just around the corner. And in Europe, they're much further along, with full implementation of the digital euro is being slated for 2026. And with that will come very tight restrictions. We're being told that only 3,000 digital euros will be available at any given time per customer.
Gary,
at least that's the current plan.
Yeah, let's pick up with this after the break. Very interesting information here on the central bank digital currency. And friends, even our IRS said no more paper checks will be going out. Refunds, no. It's all going to be digital transmitted. We'll be back with more with Gary Kyle right after the break. This is Crosstalk on VCY America.
Have you ever read through the Bible before? No, not just a verse, chapter, or book, the entire Bible. Are you familiar with God's complete letter to mankind and how it all fits together? VCY America is offering the one-year Bible in the King James Version. Each day features a reading from the Old Testament, the New Testament, Psalms, and Proverbs. It's laid out in a daily format to read and bookmark as you enter your quiet time with the Lord each day. By reading daily, you will systematically read through the entire Bible in 1 year. This one-year Bible is available for a donation of $18 and will transform your life as you commit to daily reading the Word of God, following its precepts. Call VCY 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Gary Kah is with us today, founder and director of Hope for the World. And Gary, you put out a newsletter called Hope for the World Update. Give us a word about that.
Yeah, in fact, it's going in the mail this week. We just finished it up, and one of the articles I've been quoting from is big changes in banking, and so people want to get that. If you can go to our website and subscribe to our publication. Just go to GaryKah.org, and my name is spelled GaryKah.org, GaryKah.org, and we put out a quarterly. It's usually 16 to 20 pages in length, has about 10 to 12 articles in it covering a lot of these important issues. And so by subscribing, you also help to support us so that we can keep doing what we're doing. So we would really appreciate your support on that front.
Friends, again, the website is GaryKah.org, and that's Gary for Gary, Kah, KAH.org. Gary, leading into just before that last break, we were talking about the central bank digital currency and the advocating of digital currency that's been happening in many, many nations, and there is just a lust to have this implemented, some sooner than later, but the majority of nations are going this direction.
Yeah, they are. The major nations are. Of the European countries, Sweden is the furthest along in becoming completely cashless. Only 1.2% of transactions in Sweden are currently non-digital.
Wow.
And the ones that aren't, they come with a penalty fee typically. So they've just about gone completely cashless over there. China as well, they've been almost cashless since COVID, which really was used strategically to usher in their very tightly controlled social credit score system. And I think that's a sign of things to come globally. That's kind of the model for the globalists. Meanwhile, with all of these things happening in individual countries, the Bank for International Settlements, which is headquartered in Basel, Switzerland, is working vigorously through Project Dunbar to interconnect all of these digital currencies as they are rolled out. So that's going to go very quickly, interconnecting all of them on a global scale. So once you have this global digital banking system fully operational, it's going to serve as the most complete global surveillance system ever known to mankind. And the goal, I believe, is total control of human behavior by completely controlling our money. If you can control the flow of money in between people for goods and services, you pretty much have control over the population. You're looking at a type of digital prison. And the target date for full worldwide integration is 2030. And in fact, really 2029, but they want to have all the kinks worked out by 2030. And that's in line with the World Economic Forum's global governance goals and also the UN's 2030 agenda. It all fits together. Now, they can plan all they want. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, and that's why I don't like to set dates, but I'm just sharing with you their plans. We know this is what they have planned. Again, there's quite a bit of pushback now coming from the United States against all of this. RFK Jr. has labeled CBDCs as, quote, the ultimate tool of tyranny, end quote. And so he and others, they're basically saying now is the time to make noise. If you don't want this coming in, people need to take a stand now. We have some individual states that are beginning to take a stand on this, which is good to see. Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida has been leading the way. He has signed legislation banning CBDCs in Florida and directing state agencies to refuse to accept them. He calls CBDCs, quote, a surveillance state in the making, end quote. Texas has passed similar legislation, and South Dakota, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Alabama are considering bills to ban or restrict CBDCs at their state level. So again, if enough governors stand against this agenda, maybe they can overcome what some of the big city mayors, left-leaning mayors, are trying to accomplish, because they're all in favor of this agenda. So this is a real battle taking shape here. And again, underneath it all, you've got really a spiritual clash of worldviews. And unless we understand that, I think we don't fully get what's at stake here. But they want control of our money because then they can push everything else on us. And so I highlighted my article with a few practical steps people can take, because I know right about now people are wondering, well, what can we do besides making a lot of noise? Well, I would encourage you to begin with to write your local elected officials, your senators and representatives, telling them you are not in favor of this. You want to keep physical cash flowing and not go into the central bank digital currency. But meanwhile, just 5 different things. You diversify your assets in such a way that they are largely outside of the traditional banking system. That may involve owning physical assets such as real estate in states or even countries, which are, for now at least, restricting the use of CBDCs. Secondly, owning some precious metal coins is always good, but they're getting really expensive. Today, I just checked on this. Silver is at $65 an ounce. I mean, a year ago it was in the 20s, so it's getting expensive. Thirdly, some people we know have opened bank accounts in other countries that are not pushing CBDCs. However, that can be very tedious and require a significant initial sum of money, putting it out of reach for most people. So we know some people who are pretty well off who've done some of that, but that's not an option for most of us. Fourthly, owning decentralized cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. I know in El Salvador, whose president is very similar to President Trump, they've become good friends. He's really promoting Bitcoin as an alternative to the central bank digital currencies. The only thing is, if you barter or trade with crypto, it depends 100% on the Internet. So, who ultimately controls the Internet? And if the Internet goes down, then what? What do you do? So there's nothing like physical cash. And step number 5, and this is probably the most important, is one way to possibly delay the forced use of CBDCs is by using cash for purchases whenever you can. I know it's not always possible, but if you use cash, at least some, I think it might help in keeping it more viable, because then your merchants, anybody out there wanting you to buy their products, the cash is more viable. And if 20% or 30% of everything they sell is through cash, they're not going to be as likely to promote and support the CBDCs coming out. So it just stretches it out. I think eventually, unfortunately, this is going to come in. It's just a matter of time. But we can delay it by pushing back some at the present time, and hope that President Trump also pushes back. And I'm encouraged to see some of the statements coming from Bobby Kennedy on this, and also what Governor Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. All those are important steps, and they help create some good positive energy opposing CBDCs.
Gary, I'm going to couple with that as well a push that's going on for digital ID, and we know that is going to be a component even for this central bank digital currency as well. But there's a push going on in many, many nations for digital IDs, including our own United States. But I just want to refresh the minds of our listeners to a statement made by the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer just not too many weeks back, and here's what he had to say on this issue, because they're implementing this in the UK.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that. Because decent, pragmatic, fair-minded people, they want us to tackle the issues that they see around them. And of course, the truth is, we won't solve our problems if we don't also take on the root causes, looking upstream to tackle poverty, conflict.
And it goes on from there as well, Gary, but that push for that digital ID system and really keeping track of every person.
Yeah, it goes hand in glove. And so the UK has taken a big turn in that direction, but people are rising up now and taking a stand over there. But, you probably remember a month or two back, a gentleman, a comedian from Ireland, landed at Heathrow and there were, I don't know how many cops there to arrest him because of something he had said speaking out against certain things that the UK government is doing. So it's to that point. If you call the police in London, if somebody stole your bike, good luck. It could be hours or days before anybody shows up. But they sent a whole fleet of police to arrest this guy when he got off the plane because of something he had stated. So freedom of speech is pretty much gone over there.
Yeah, you're using a wrong pronoun. Or I read a story, crazy, out of the UK here recently, where the leaf had flown into a man's mouth, and he spit it out, and there were actually police who were arresting him for littering. I mean, it was crazy stuff going on.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. People are in the process of losing their minds. Some have already done so. And again, it comes down to spiritual discernment. You know, if you reject Jesus and the gospel and the truth of the Bible, the Old and the New Testaments, you're going to fall for any big lie that comes along if it's laid out cleverly enough. And so my heart goes out to these people. They're so misguided and misled, and unless they come around and accept the Lord and see the error of their ways, they're going to spend all of eternity in a place that's not very pleasant at all. And, you know, I know, you know, we do everything we can not to sound too harsh over the air, but that's what it all comes down to. I mean, all of our days are numbered. We're all going to go into eternity at some point. For some of us sooner rather than later. And when you see the massive deception that has taken shape, and even then, in some conservative circles where people might have more common sense on some of these issues, but they still don't know the Lord, walking with Him, you know, and having accepted Jesus as your Savior. So, being conservative politically doesn't get you into heaven. I mean, it might help the United States some in the short term, but you're still not getting it. And so we're really just more and more trying to focus on that. And every one of our issues now, we have the plan of salvation in there, really strongly urging people to accept Jesus as their Savior if they haven't done so already.
And friends, that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. And there is hope that's found in Jesus Christ. Our phone number to Crosstalk today is 800-733-9829. This hour is going by so quickly today. If you have a quick question you'd like to ask of Gary or a very brief comment, give us a call, 800-733-9829. We're talking about globalism today, looking back at 2025, looking forward in 2026 and beyond, because, friends, the agenda is out there. The agenda is there, and certainly the prince of the power of the air is very much at work today. But, friends, we've got a message that needs to be heard, a message of good news, the message of the gospel, and how much this ought to motivate us to share the good news with others. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back to your phone calls here on Crosstalk. The number 800-733-9829. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
I'm Brandon House. This is the Worldview Report. Over the weekend, we saw the slaughter and murder of many innocent civilians, mostly Jews, on the beach there known as Bondi Beach in Australia. They were celebrating Hanukkah by the sea. Turns out the father and son jihadists were from Pakistan. And now we're reading reports that the son was on the radar of the authorities a few years ago, but reportedly deemed not a threat. How often have we seen terrorists who were indeed on the radar of authorities but cleared or, well, never fully investigated? This is becoming a pattern. One has to ask, why? I reached out yesterday to a friend of mine whose husband is a rabbi in the area. Let them know that I was thinking of them, and should their synagogue need any assistance or anything, please don't hesitate to call. Let's use this as an opportunity, righteous Gentiles, to reach out to our Jewish friends and let them know about our concern for them. This would be a great witness as they celebrate Hanukkah. I'm Brandon House.
Gary Kah is with us on Crosstalk today. His website, GaryKah.org. And Kah is spelled K-A-H. And Gary, just talking with you here, the UN has quite an agenda here for this year, 2026. Some major meetings coming up in the next several weeks and months.
Yeah, January 19th to the 23rd, you've got the World Economic Forum having their annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland. They're going to be pushing all of this stuff that we've been talking about. Then just a few days later, February 1 through 7, you've got the religious component, the United Nations Interfaith Harmony Week. That's pushing the coming together, the unifying of all the world's religions, which is something necessary to usher in this new order. February 3rd through the 5th, that same week, you've got the World Government Summit in Dubai. That's the meeting that Pope Francis spoke at. That's a political, economic, and religious element all coming together there. And then February 19th to the 20th, there's an AI Impact Summit. It's going to be held in New Delhi, India. And rapid movement forward in that area, as we all know, in AI. So these are just some of the things we're looking at early on in the new year already, and there's just more of the same going through 2026.
Let's go to Jeff in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. By the way, he's got a calendar of these events in that newsletter he's just putting out right now. Jeff in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Hi, Jim and Gary. I took the opportunity to go listen to Lech Walesa, who has been traveling the United States. I kind of thought it was going to be a history thing, but it turned out to be all about continentalism, and which, of course, is part of the New World Order, dividing the world into 10 countries, 10 continents. So I'm wondering if, do you support Donald Trump's push to continentalize North America?
Gary?
I do not. And I get to talk to my Canadian friends quite a bit. One of my best friends is in Canada, so I get a real earful from up there. But I can tell you that North America all as one region is one of the regions that was being planned way back in the late 60s, early 70s in a map laid out by the Club of Rome, which is a very significant organization in pushing this agenda. And they actually had a plan for 10 global regions that they could then build the world government upon. And their thinking was it'd be much easier to take 10 regions into a global system than to take over 200 separate sovereign nations into a world government. So it's kind of a breakdown of national sovereignty. And even though maybe the U.S. would lead our region in that respect, it's still not good. I want to see Canada and the U.S. and Mexico remain sovereign countries.
Yeah. Thank you for the call, Jeff. And what's interesting in this, too, this number 10, I mean, we just did a program the other day here dealing with the image of Nebuchadnezzar and the 10 toes and these 10 regions, a kind of interesting parallel there. Let's go to Greg in Bloomington, Illinois. Greg, you're on the air.
Hey, thank you, brothers. Gary, actually, I have two questions. You had spoken about how certain states are dominated by large cities. And I know there was a movement at one time for Western Oregon to combine with Idaho. And I can tell you that there's also a movement here in Illinois for certain counties to join Indiana. And my questions for you are, how likely do you think that is that certain states are going to reconstruct themselves? And a tougher question is, do you think that the United States of America will eventually split into two or more nations, and what the possibility of that is?
Okay.
And I'll take my answers off the air. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Greg. Yeah, it's actually the eastern part of Oregon, wanting to join with Idaho. It would be great if that could happen, but they're going to fight it like crazy, and so it remains to be seen. In California as well, parts of the Central Valley, they'd love to be their own state and have nothing to do with San Francisco or L.A., and in Illinois, hey, we would welcome some of your conservative counties over here in Indiana. I know how frustrating it is over there. Our son lived just outside of Champaign, Illinois for 3 years, just moved to Arizona. And the people over there out in the country, they're conservative, and they're just so fed up with the Chicago vote that they cannot overcome. So I sense your frustration, and I'd say keep taking a stand. Don't let up. But it's going to be difficult. It won't be easy.
He's talking about a split in the U.S. into two separate.
That's right. Yeah. Let me address that quickly. Back in the 1800s, mid-1800s, we had the North versus the South. There were pockets within the North and the South that were on the other side, but pretty much you could draw the lines, and it made it pretty easy as far as that goes. Today, you've got these pockets all over the country. You've got the blue cities, a few red cities. I mean, what would it be like if the country literally splits in half? Heaven forbid there be an actual civil war. But I hear that term being thrown around more and more all the time because we're on such polar opposites now. I mean, the country is heavily divided, and it seems to be going more and more in that direction every time. And I think if it came down to an actual conflict, a war, we'll be at the weakest time that we've been as a nation. I think our enemies from outside might smell an opportunity to attack us and try to finish us off. So I think we ought to do everything possible to avoid an all-out war and try to do what we can through the political process. But it's been frustrated by left-leaning judges who are a type of firewall, it seems like, for the left. You know, it seems like anything we try to do, some judge somewhere overrules it, and that is very frustrating.
Let's go to Kathy next. Hi, Kathy. You're on the air.
Hi, Jim. Thank you. You guys probably aren't old enough to remember when the original Mayor Daley was mayor of Chicago, and Ed Dirksen was a prominent senator from Illinois.
What is your question? We're down to 45 seconds.
Oh, just comment that they can have something to say, even if the mayors are very left-wing.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's go to Merle in Tennessee. You're on the air, Merle.
Yeah, Jim, I think we'd be wise to not be complacent in any way and to use these next 3 years to prepare physically, spiritually, mentally, in every way to be prepared for what's already been prophesied. And thank you, Gary, for being on the wall.
Thank you, Merle. Thank you, Merle, for the call here today. Gary, in the final seconds here, we are the salt of the earth, the light of the world, and both of those are active agents.
That's right. I mean, we've got to be courageous when we're bold and don't show fear in the face of difficult times. It's contagious. Courage is contagious. And so I just encourage everybody listening to take a stand for the Lord, but to do so as tactfully and lovingly as possible.
Gary, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
We've run out of time for more calls, but friends, check out GaryCa.org. And friends, don't lose heart. Keep your trust in the Lord. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.